Peterson. This screencast is about traits and probability. Down in the corner, you can see, yeah, those are sperm cells fertilizing an egg. So this is a human egg and human sperm cells. Only one of those guys, one of those sperm is going to get in there. What's the probability that of all those sperm cells? Yeah, so think about all the probabilities involved here in our conceptions or any conception that happens in nature. Anyway, they follow rules of probability, so the business of chance. We've seen some of that already with regards to Face Lab, right? It's all the roll of the dice or the flip of the coin, as we had in Face Lab. So here's from Calvin and Hobbes, and Calvin's mom screaming at the dad, "It's your fault we didn't have a sweet little girl. Your stupid chromosome, not mine." So if you know anything about Calvin and Hobbes, if you don't, you need to find out about Calvin and Hobbes. And here's Calvin's kind of take on it. He's like, "I suppose if I had two X chromosomes, I'd feel hostile too." You can take that for what it's worth. That's kind of what Calvin had to say about that whole situation. His mother's response to Calvin. She loves Calvin most of the time. Anyway, so Punnett squares. Punnett squares are about the business of prediction. On the axes of the Punnett square, and we've talked about this a little bit already, I think. That's where we put the genes, the haploid reproductive cells, one gene for each trait. And then the interior boxes shows the possibilities, either phenotype or genotype. So in this one, we have parent 1 and parent 2. This particular person is heterozygous, big A and little a, for each of whatever the particular traits are. And then in the middle, you can see the possible genotypes, the genes for the offspring. So it yields some possibilities. Doesn't mean it's always going to happen, but that's the possibility that you're going to be little a, little a. So what is the possibility there? What's that probability? If there are 4 squares, what's the probability there of being, we would call that homozygous recessive? All right, so here's, we can take a look at a monohybrid cross. So this is a cross actually that Mendel did. He had purebred plants. That's what he worked with. Purebred means that they, like the purple flower plants, had produced nothing but purple flowers for generations. There were no white flowers in their genes, and so he was pretty certain that their genes were nothing but purple. So we have purple flower plants, and he's going to cross-pollinate those with a white flower plant. So we call it homozygous dominant and homozygous recessive. So here I've reduced the gene number and the chromosome number. So where have we seen that process before? Right? So it's going to happen for both parents. And then we actually fill in the blanks. And they're all what? Big P, little p. What begins with P? Painting pink pajamas, policeman in a pail, Peter Pepper's puppy, and now Papa's in the pail. I've read that book a few thousand bajillion times. They're all what? Heterozygous that came out of there. Okay, so what happens if we take those two plants and we allow them to self-pollinate? So this one we're just going to let the plants do the self-pollination. So 2 heterozygous plants, big P, little p, one dominant, one recessive gene. We're going to fill in the blanks here for the parents. So big P, little p there, big P, little p there, right? So that's the process of meiosis. We segregated those genes, and we wind up with a different ratio, right? One that's homozygous dominant, big P, 2 that are heterozygous, big P, little p, and one that's homozygous recessive. So the ratio of genotypes is 1 to 2 to 1. The phenotypic ratio of, like, which ones are pink or purple? There's 3 of them, right? So 3 are purple and 1 is white. So the ratio there is 3 to 1 for the dominant gene. So you can calculate those using probability. And probability, some of you have talked about this, probability predicts an average number of occurrences. So in Face Lab, you flip the coins, you were dealing with predictions and probability that shows an average number of occurrences. So here's a formula for probability. The total possible outcomes underneath the number of ways a specific event can occur. So if we have 4 possible outcomes, and you've seen this with the flipping the coins. There's the 1/4 probability you had heads, 1/4 probability was tails, and then 1/4 and 1/4 heads tails or tails heads. So 1/2 the probability you could have that heterozygous combination of heads and tails, and you saw that in Face Lab a lot. So again, probability, big idea. Inheritance of traits always follows that big idea. Here's something like we've seen before, where we've got heterozygous. This organism's heterozygous for this particular trait, and we've got that 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. You could have figured out that for yourself. So the phenotype's 3 to 1, the genotype's 1 to 2 to 1. Here's another example. So hair, we've got 2 individuals with wavy hair. They're heterozygous for the trait. So what's the business here? How many are going to wind up with straight hair that are going to be homozygous dominant? How many are going to be heterozygous? And how many will be homozygous recessive? Excuse me. Right. So the phenotype's 3 to 1. Okay. And the genotype is 1 to 2 to 1. So let's go back to Calvin. So here's Calvin's dad. He's got an X and a Y chromosome, right? The little nubby 3-dimensional chromosome there is the Y, and the other one's the X. And here's the mom, and here's Calvin. Dad contributes X, half the genetic material, and mom contributes the other half. There's an X, so there's XY, there's Calvin. She was kind of hoping for this. She was kind of hoping for Dad to have donated the X chromosome so she could have had a cute little girl, right? So it is the man's fault. Calvin's sex is totally dependent on Dad. So traits and probability. Hope that helps.